Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and thank you for being with us for another amazing topic of conversation. Thank you to our sponsors, the Health Channel and the free telehealth consultation with a partnership with Amy. So go to the Health Channel, healthtv.com for free doctors. Also, I want to thank the I Remember Against Genocide bracelet. That really goes against everything genocide. And I just want to hope that by the next conversation, there will be peace and everyone will be happy and the war will be over. So today, I want to welcome former Judge Sarah. So welcome today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And our conversation is very, instead of being black and white, I know there's a lot of gray lines. Because when I was growing up, my vision of what the system and the United States was, it was that you told the truth. So I remember being like, okay, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And that was what this country was based upon. Like you said everything, you said something, and it was, you were honestly saying the right thing. And then something really changed. Because where I come from in Colombia, everybody was lying because of something. Like corruption is very high up there. We never believed anyone. So it was like, do you believe or you don't believe? And then the United States for me was like nothing but the truth. And I think that the biggest shift came after 9/11. But that is for another conversation. So my question to you is, as a judge, what happened with the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Well, and what is the truth? And, the definition of truth, you could go to the dictionary. What is the definition of truth and honesty and all of that? I can talk about the jury and the way someone perceives something. So and to backtrack, when you were talking about the way it used to be, even people, a long time ago used to do deals on just a handshake because they trusted the other person.
Correct.
And now everything has to be put in writing, but even a contract can be taken out of context and misinterpreted, and is it, and the truth according to someone else. So let's use the example of a jury. And I always say this, that everybody sees things through a different lens, right? So the way I see something and the way you see something can be different. It's like a piece of art. I look at a piece of art and it's beautiful. Somebody else looks at a piece of art and it's disgusting. So, but everybody sees things through a different lens, like the truth. So for a jury trial, if I'm going to use in the criminal context, someone who is proclaiming their innocence, I didn't do it. And then the other side, the state, believes that the person did do it. And maybe the person really is innocent, right? Or in a civil case, somebody is being sued, and the other side is the person who's being sued is saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And the other person is saying, no, you wronged me. And you're giving all this information to the jury. So one side says, oh, the jury's going to believe me because I have the truth on my side. And the other side is saying, oh, no, the jury is going to believe me because I have the truth on my side. So somebody is telling the truth. Some of the real, what is the real honest story? But the jury is going, it's the truth according to the way the jury views it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. Of what is really the truth? That's a great question. And that's and the truth is the way someone perceives it.
I think there are three truths: the way you see it, the way the other person sees it, and the actual thing that happens.
That's true. That's true.
So there's really three.
That's true. Well, I agree with you. However, I think that there sometimes one side is telling the truth and the facts are the true facts, and the other side distorts the facts to make it seem like they're telling the truth. And so 16 years, I've seen a lot of things and nothing shocks me anymore. Even though I know what really is the truth, but somebody else sees it a different way. That's why, unfortunately, in the United States, there's so much litigation, especially here in South Florida. My husband's family's from Canada, and they're not especially Montreal, they're not, the court system is made up so it doesn't create all that litigation. So they're like, oh, you people in the United States, you have all this litigation.
You sue for everything.
For everything. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that was my biggest shock. I fell one time and the next day I was treated like a queen just because they wanted to know if I was going to sue them. And in my mind, like, what is suing you?
Exactly. Right.
Like I fell, it was my fault. So
Right.
I didn't have that concept of litigation.
Right.
And that is the part that now brings us to the values and ethics. So, what is really the meaning? Like, what are the values behind that? I'm talking about lawsuits and litigation, because when I fell, it was my fault. So, why would I go and sue the place where I was in?
Right.
And that's the part that brings us to what are the real values? What's the meaning of the value and ethics?
Right. So unfortunately, we live in a litigious society here in the United States, and I can only talk about really here in South Florida. But people want to sue. Not necessarily. Some people, even though maybe they're wronged, um, won't, and somebody says, well, why don't you sue? You have a great case. Said, no, you know what? I just don't want to be involved in the court system. I don't, even I'm fine with whatever happened, even though that person was wronged. And then somebody else goes in, and even though they really nothing happened, and they go in and sue. And that's unfortunate because that's where the legal system, the lawyers get a bad reputation because unfortunately there are instances, more so than not, where where cases are filed that maybe should not be filed, and which drives up the cost, which drives up the congestion of the court system for people who really need to go into the court system. And I can give you a lot of examples. And you know what? Maybe I'm going with a far reach. I'll use domestic violence for an example. There are people who file domestic violence injunctions that where unfortunately nothing really happened, but they're trying to get a leg up in their family case, in their divorce case. So it's not, nothing really happened to them. But what happens is if they file a false DV case, then what the triggering event could be where the other side will be separated from their children. And that can just create a whole host of terrible, terrible problems. And unfortunately, the children suffer because of it. So, why I say that is because if you file a frivolous, a false DV claim, then which angers me to no end, it takes away people who are really truly victims from getting into the court system. And so that's why I was saying the congestion of the court system.
But that's also creating a whole trigger effect on the wrong side. You can accuse somebody from violence that really didn't commit that, and you can also ruin somebody else's life.
You can ruin somebody's life on so many levels. If, for example, if somebody is a school teacher, can you imagine being falsely accused? And what could happen? Just as an example, somebody's profession, someone's livelihood, not to mention, as I said before, if there are children, usually it's cases where children are involved, and then automatically the other parent is not able to see the child unless it's maybe under supervised circumstances, and then the relationship of the child between the child or children and that parent becomes strained. And I saw it happen, and it's just so, it's horrible and it's horrendous. And that's where it goes back to the conversation.
Of values and ethics. Like,
Yes.
why do people cross the line? Just for selfish reasons?
Oh, wow. That's that's a
A loaded.
loaded question. Why do people cross the line? So, as I tell my children, and I think we've spoken about this before offline, is that you can't control what other people say or do, right? You can control who you are. So, why do people cross the line? Maybe because they, like you said, motives are, do they have some self interest? Are they just corrupt individuals? Maybe they want to do it, as I said, for selfish reasons, for bad reasons. They want to hurt you. They have other ulterior motives, for maybe they want to gain something in some other, in another, there's so many. I mean,
But that comes back to a selfish.
it is selfish. It is selfish. And it may not, I mean, that person or maybe group of people have want to hurt that person, and they don't care, they don't care about the consequences, right? They
Yeah.
don't care about what could happen to that person or other people that would be affected or impacted because of that person's actions.
But I also found now that there are no consequences for a lot of people that cross the line.
That's true. That's true.
Lately, moving forward, there are no consequences.
That's true.
I have a handful of examples that have crossed the line in a huge way, and there has never been any consequences. So they feel that they're entitled to do anything and everything.
That's true. When somebody feels empowered, they feel like they're shielded from everything. And then, but sometimes, like you said, so nothing happens to them, and then they can continue doing what they're doing, or they 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 reached their objective, and still they're able to just continue without any repercussions happening to them. I agree with you. I mean, what can be done? Sometimes, unfortunately, nothing can be done. Those people just get away with some horrible actions, and there's no um, repercussions because of what they did. And is that fair? No. Um, is it just? No. But I don't know the answer to what can be done. Um,
When you were on the bench, how did you filter what was truth, what was not true? And I know that a lot of the decisions were made by the jurors,
right.
but were you able, like, what was your wisdom behind it so that you were able to clear the path?
Right. So certainly, and I made decisions. I was on the family bench and making decisions on, on where a child, as far as time sharing and all of that, and certainly very, very, very difficult and stressful decisions. Um, and well, nobody's perfect, and certainly, if I can replay
The
life
movie.
clock, the life clock, would I go back and maybe change some of my decisions? Maybe. I mean, I'll be the first one to say that. I don't know. I'm a human being. You bring life experience. It's human nature. I hope I evaluated based on the credibility of the person, my own inner, my own inner
Intuition.
intuition, and that I gauged whether somebody was being truthful. Also, what was put in front of me, so that evidence, where one side brings evidence to court to prove their case. So just because you have a strong case doesn't mean you're going to ultimately prevail. You could have the strongest position, and you could have the law and the facts on your side. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win with a jury, because again, it's the truth according to the way the jury sees something. So that's just, if I had to make a decision or make that ultimate decision, I would evaluate it based on the information that was given to me, of course, the law, and the facts, the way I evaluated it, and also the people that were witnesses, and the parties themselves, and whether or not I believed they were credible.
So let me ask you something. As a society, how can we better communicate in order to avoid being in that trap? Like, what can we do?
Well, certainly we can all. I think ultimately, and not to get into a whole major philosophical discussion, but I think being open to each other and listening to each other's opinions, and having more transparency in our lives, where we're able to have that dialogue. And I really do believe this all begins, obviously, uh, in childhood and
In
children,
education.
education in schools. What are they being taught? Are they, and being able to have that open dialogue with somebody else, and so that you're not, so you are able to avoid conflict. And my philosophy also is, and I think this is true in life too, in every aspect, is the more communication we have with each other, whether you agree with that person or not, the more likelihood the barriers of conflict will be broken. And it goes to what you were saying, Gladys, that where communication and having respect for each other, and for me, living your life with kindness, right? And communicating, being a good, kind person. And I will say this, temper my sentence with this. Just because you're a kind person doesn't mean somebody won't do something bad, because bad things happen to good
To good
people.
people. No, and I get it. I get what you're saying, but I have to disagree on one thing, that the education starts not in schools but at home.
Well, that's true
Because
too.
it is what
That's true.
you show your children.
A
It's the
hundred.
behavior that you show, like teach by example.
I agree with you. And
And
you're
that nobody can take it away. I think that teachers, yes, there are support system, but teachers are there to teach them the curriculum and the real values they need to learn at home.
100%, and I agree with you. And you're absolutely right. And adding to that, and being a role model for your children. And but what I guess I should add about educators, because when you have a school, you have diverse children from diverse backgrounds, and teachers, if they see a child if you're in the schoolyard, like I used to tell my children, that you don't have to be best friends with someone, but if you're sitting at a table during lunch and you see somebody sitting by themselves, invite that person to sit with you.
Correct.
That's what I meant.
I remember one time, and there's a story about that, that I was called to the school uh, to talk to the teacher and said what happened. And the teacher told me that everyone, when she got into the classroom, all the desks were put on the side and they left one girl by herself because everybody decided that they were going to go against her. And my daughter took her desk and put it right beside the girl.
Uh,
And it started a whole conversation. And I remember that I was called because my daughter was doing, she was creating a lot of disturbance in the classroom. And I go, you gotta be kidding. You're calling me because she's creating disturbance? Like, what is the teacher doing to avoid the whole class bullying a little girl? Like, somebody stood up for it, something that the teacher would have had the moral and the leadership to do it.
Absolutely.
So that's where I mean that you don't teach those things, you learn them.
That's so true. And
You
leadership,
learn them from home. You see what's going on.
right? Leadership and kindness and respect and decency, it all begins at home. And you're absolutely right. That's a beautiful story about your daughter, and inclusive, is it, and being inclusive. I think I need coffee. It reminds me of a story about my daughter. um, and I wouldn't have even known anything about it because my daughter didn't say anything. One day I see one of the fathers whose daughter was in the same grade with my daughter. This was years ago. And he said, "You know what? Your daughter's so wonderful." And I said, "Well, I know that." Yes, I know she's wonderful. But he said, "Well, no, she's truly wonderful because a couple of girls, middle school is hard for girls. A couple of girls were bullying my daughter, and your daughter stepped in." And he said, "My daughter's very shy and she wouldn't defend herself." And he said, "Your daughter stepped in and spoke up and defended my daughter."
And that I'm sure changed the other girl's life.
Yeah.
I know. That's before, let me ask you something. Now that everything is in social media
Mm,
and we post comments,
mm.
I know. I this morning I got a call from my daughter like, what did you post that I've been getting? A lot of calls from everyone.
That sounds familiar. Oh,
What did you post that I've been getting and I haven't had time to read? So give me the update because,
that's funny.
and I know that it created a lot of mixed opinions, but you say that I wanted to ask you, how did this conflict with the First Amendment?
Sure, that's so funny. Wow, that sounds so familiar. What did you just post? And my oldest daughter said, "Please don't post anything without my permission." Yeah.
And I, regardless of what you believed in, I thought that that what I post is something that I do believe. And a lot of people, while I got this really positive comments, I also got this very negative comment. Now we know where you stand. And the whole thing is being about respect because
Yeah,
I wasn't insulting anyone. I literally put what I believe, but
you know,
so how do
my parents.
posting, how does this conflict with the First Amendment? Like really, from
Our
a legal point?
I know our children want us to have a filter. So and that's the First Amendment. And since it was first established, and the great experiment, right? That with the Constitution and the first and all the amendments, the First Amendment, free speech and freedom of the press, and certainly we're still, I think, we're still a relatively young country, and we're still evolving and not perfect, certainly, but just seeing yesterday where Elon Musk just bought a Twitter for how many billions of dollars, and how is he going to use that platform? Not to digress, but I mean, social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Correct, because yes, that's
And
exactly the good, the bad, and the ugly.
and putting things out there. Yes, we do have our First Amendment rights. We have the ability, and thank goodness we do have that ability, because why was this country established? Because in England, the rights of people to use their voice were suppressed, right? So it's free speech is the First Amendment is so important in our society in the United States. I mean, look at what's happening, in the world, right? And we certainly don't want our voices suppressed. However, that there's a disclaimer involved. So with social media, and I tell like my children, you put things out there, you can't unring the bell.
You can correct. You can't take it off, take it away.
And people put things out there, I guess they feel more comfortable, and I understand this, where they can just put things out there, and they've got that, and I use the word filter, where they can just type something in, and it's almost like a screen, because that person that they're saying something horrible about is not right in front of them. So they can just put it out there on Facebook or other social media platforms. And what is free speech? What is the First Amendment? And what does that mean? Certainly, from the legal point of view, there is something called defamation and slander and libel. But then you're going into the court system and you're suing, and there's no guarantee you're going to prevail. And even if you go look at Johnny Depp, right? Everybody is kind of immersed in the whole Johnny Depp trial because he's suing his ex-wife for defamation, because she wrote this op-ed in the Washington Post saying that he abused her, and he's saying that it was all lies, it was slanderous, and he lost a lot of jobs because of what she said. and he can't get that back, because if what she said were lies, then he can't get that, and then he'll never get, what he had before, as far as some of these jobs that he lost. But social media is a great platform. One, it's been great for me for marketing. It's a great platform to uh, to connect, and network, connect. It's like here with Zoom, it's an incredible. Fortunately, we have Zoom, because during COVID, we would have been stuck in limbo. So that's where, and social media is a great place to keep to, because that's why Facebook was created, right? Because of that.
To connect,
To
correct.
connect.
I lost you. So I think we have to cut this conversation short since we lost Judge Sarah. I hope that you join us. Definitely part two of this
Hi,
conversation.
are you
Oh,
back?
we got you back.
Hi, I'm sorry, it's my internet. No, I mean, just look, not to go into a whole long diatribe, I think people use social media, they put things out, which they are protected by the First Amendment, but, and you could say a lot of things in social media. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're true, but they could twist things, and unfortunately, it doesn't cross the line, as far as maybe potentially being defamatory statements towards someone. Yes, of course, but will
But
ever,
crossing the line, look what's happening with social media, that some of the teenagers, and the statistics are really high of what they said about them, and they're committing suicide.
yes, that's
You
true.
can literally ruin someone's life
That's true.
about what you say or what you don't say.
100.
And I can tell you from a personal experience that I've been weighing the things of what to do because of a defamation and something that was said that was totally twisted and not true.
I agree with you. And if somebody, especially if somebody's been malicious to the point that they defamed somebody's name and reputation, what do you do? Because you can't unring the bell, right?
No, you can't.
And like you said, with children and cyber bullying, right? And children, like, and we'll go back to what you said, Gladys, which is true. You learn, you teach by example. So you could, if a child gets on the computer and or whatever, and gets on social media and maybe a chat group with the other students, and cyber bullies another student, um, you can only imagine, the example that they're getting from their parents. Because,
Correct. So
yeah,
if
because,
they're getting that, you're creating the
right,
next generation of bullies, especially if they see that nothing happened.
right, exactly. And you know what? And a lot of the times the parents will defend and say, well, my child wouldn't do that. And
Yeah,
oh,
of
it
course.
wasn't so, and what they did wasn't so terrible. And you know what? Like in suicide, um, there are no do-overs. When a
No.
child commits suicide, there are no do-overs.
And not even in suicide. Writing something that is not true about someone else can really affect their lives moving forward.
That's true.
Like now, certain comments or anything, we can just agree. What happened to really just agree to disagree? Like you believe in something, I believe in something else, and we can have a discussion over a cafecito. But that doesn't mean that it's what I say is uh, what has to go or what you say has to go. No,
Right.
you talk about communications, you talk about helping people end in a positive way.
That's true. And and then the flip side of it is, oh, you need to have a thick skin. I didn't really, oh, I said it, but it was just all in jest, or it doesn't mean
No,
anything. Well, I'm sorry, the effect on the listener or other listeners by saying something cruel and deliberate, and the emotional impact. And if somebody, you don't know what somebody's going through when you
no.
say something that is so offensive that, like you said, suicide is unfortunate, that next step, that the step where you can't do a do-over. But there's, I mean, separate and
There's
apart.
a lot of things that you
Right.
cannot do a do-over.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can paralyze your life. If somebody is hurt by somebody's vicious or malicious words, it could paralyze. Somebody could not, end up leaving their job. They won't be functional at their job.
Correct.
They could end up getting fired. They could end up getting, their marriage could be affected by it. They could be, there's just so many, that whole domino effect that can happen because of
Of
somebody.
what was said, correct. So we go back to the truth of what is the truth and what is libel or what is defamation.
Right.
But with this, I wanted to end up with a story that I remember the rabbi telling us, because the community that I was in was talking a lot. It was like it went overboard. People were talking bad about everyone. It was not an inclusive community. On the contrary, I call it a destructive community. And the rabbi once said, he said, you know what? Let's do an exercise. Because somebody went and said to him, what do I do? What do we do in this case? And he said, okay, let's do an exercise for the whole community. Each one is going to break a feather pillow, and we're going to go and throw the feathers outside. And this is all the comments that you've said about everyone else. So now go and pick them up.
Mm.
You cannot take anything away. You cannot pick up the feathers once they fly and be taken and be flown away by the wind. So it's the same with social media.
I love that.
Everything that you put out there or everything that you can say has an effect on everybody's life.
Yeah, you need to be.
Whether if it's for a good thing or a bad thing, but it will take an effect. So
Yeah, you need to be mindful of the content you put out there, and think about somebody else's, feelings, before somebody might do it, you know, maliciously, and that's something you can't control. But just normally, if you're going to put something out there, just be careful of the messaging. And, you and I already spoke about this because you're such a good, warm soul, and you're so genuine and such a really good, decent person. And I'm not, certainly, not perfect, but and I, again, my parents, it's about being kind and being a good person. That's what's
yes,
important.
it's about being kind. And with that, I just wish that everybody would be kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
And
inviting me.
to everyone, uh, hope you have a kind word with someone today. Until the next one, and above all, stay safe. Have a great week.